Okay, so this is the path to light, the spiritual path, and we're going to take it from a view, from yoga's view. There's another video that takes the same thing, but it looks at it from Vedic astrology. So you can, if you're interested, you can compare the two. They both complement each other. They both have really useful things to say. So let's just look basically from a yogi's point of view. So if we have a look at this chart here, this is just a general map based a little bit on Western science, but also traditional knowledge. So it says integrative energy medicine. And the notion here is that yoga, taken to its full expression, this is about what's called enlightenment. And that's just basically getting healthier and happier in a very profound way compared to what we normally consider as possible. So in terms of science, so we're trying to keep this grounded in kind of a common language. Physicists and scientists, they talk about matter and energy. I'm sure you've heard of, like, Einstein's equation equals mc squared, that type of thing. So you look on the left side of this graph here, this chart, you see we've got energy and matter. And the idea is, as you progress going up the chart, there's more information. That means there's more capability. And the idea is that like energy's got more power to control matter. Then if you go up even further, you see there's something called information. And that's what the scientists or the mathematicians would call it. For most of us, certainly for like a yogi or something like that, we'd call it consciousness. So that's moving towards what traditionally in religion you would call heaven, or the realm of higher spiritual knowledge. Right? So it's like as you go up the ladder, you have like a better view of things, and what's interesting is that you have more ability to affect things at a lower level. I mean, it's this is the whole model. The whole thing is tongue-in-cheek, but it's very much grounded in fact, in historical fact, in current scientific fact, and in my own personal experience. So the idea then is that you have this spectrum like a rainbow, and it goes from what we know day-to-day living, what we call matter. It's just going to the grocery store, paying the bills, living life, having a good time, doing whatever it is you do. That's matter. And then gradually, as you move up, then you get more into the heart and into the mind. So you may have heard of what's called like body-mind medicine. And the idea is that there's a whole branch of medicine where what you think, how you feel affects health, affects your health. So that's the idea, is like the body is down here. That's like a person. And what you think and what you feel, so like the heart, and then eventually thoughts, what a person thinks is at a higher level, and there's an interaction between them, and it goes both ways. Yeah, as you know, like if you're not feeling good for some reason, then it's pretty easy. It's much easier to be grumpy or a little bit, scattered, that type of thing. So there's an interaction both ways between energy, or the heart and the mind, and matter, which is like the body and day-to-day things. So that should be pretty straightforward. So the idea is that you have these different types of medicine, of healing, of experience that have been developed throughout the ages. And what we see here, there are four main ones listed here. So to start, we'll start on the right side. There's Western medicine, and Western medicine is, it has its roots back in the Middle Ages and stuff, with the advent of things like penicillin and things, where you started to gain some power over nature, so you could actually make a difference. So Western medicine has a very important place, and it's the most sophisticated technology in terms of science that we have. But if you look at the scope, so the scope is how far up the ladder it goes. For most, not all, but for most Western medicine, the focus is like, where's the problem? Let's fix that. And that's good enough. So if the problem is, say, with the body, like a heart problem or a digestive problem or something like that, then Western medicine focuses on that. If it was like an emotional problem, then you have like psychologists and psychiatrists and things like that, and so they would focus up more on the heart, the mind. But basically, most of the work is basically here in the first level. So we have three levels: the first level, the second level, and the third level. So, there is, like I was saying, there's an interaction. So there's some heart down here in this level too. So Western medicine basically covers this ground, and it's best for acute things, like if a person breaks an ankle or something, breaks a bone, or has an acute infection or something like that. Western medicine's brilliant at that. We got surgery and all sorts of amazing technological tools. So we call that medicine acute. So it's good for things that are, urgent, that need urgent care, especially with that. What's been discovered over the last, handful of decades is that often, because of the way Western medicine focuses on the problem and fixes right at the cause of the problem, sometimes that doesn't fix the whole thing, so sometimes that leads to what are called side effects. And so you can take a pill to, say, fix a heart problem, and all of a sudden you have a problem with indigestion or something like that, or your liver's affected. Those are called side effects. So a different approach, which has been around for several thousand years, is what's called Eastern medicine. And the two classics is, one is from India, which is called Ayurveda. So from India, Eastern means the Far East. And another one comes from China, which is what we call Chinese medicine. You might have heard of traditional Chinese medicine, like you might have heard of acupuncture and things like that. So there are various, those are the two most popular, but there are other ones too. But the idea is that they all basically use herbs and other methods to treat like the whole person, to fix the problem. What it means is that usually there are fewer side effects and often a much more successful and lasting fix. But the real power of Eastern medicine is more for long-term problems. So it's like old age, that's a long-term problem, or some long-term stress, and that gradually causes, like, say, an ulcer or something like that. So Eastern medicine is good for what's called chronic, which just means the problem has been kind of brewing in the background for a long time, and eventually it shows up. And it turns out that in our modern society here in the West, because we have such a fast pace of life, most people are subject to chronic stress, to just too much things happening too fast, and it's just too difficult to keep the whole thing together. So everybody's stressed, and they have it for a long period of time. That's called chronic. And so in the end, you got people, that start to break down for all sorts of different reasons, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual, because of this stress. And it turns out that generally there's a general trend in society, that recognizing that Eastern medicine has a lot to offer, especially for these kind of situations, which happen to be the vast majority of problems for the vast majority of people these days. So the message here is that both Eastern and Western medicine have a place. Rule, again, there's always exceptions, but as a rule of thumb, Western medicine is especially good for acute problems because it's very powerful. If you have an infection, you need to fix it. So take an antibiotic, fix it. But once it's fixed, then you want to make your digestive system better again, because like an antibiotic kills bacteria in your digestive tract, and it can cause tummy problems and things like that. So then you use like Western methods to fix the problem, the short-term problem. But then you use Eastern medicine, Eastern ideas to basically affect and work with lifestyle. So it's more like an attitude, what you do over the long haul, that makes a difference. So both of those are good. But if you look at the scope, again, the vertical part for Eastern medicine, you see it goes a little bit higher than Western medicine. And this is true. It's like in both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, they talk about an energy. In Chinese medicine, they talk about something called Qi. And traditionally in the Ayurveda, which is more related, Ayurveda is more related to yoga, which you'd probably know about as here in West yoga. That's related to what's called prana. But they're both saying the same thing. It's basically a form of energy. In its simplest form, it's a form of electricity, but it gets more subtle. But just a tongue-in-cheek, it's a form of electricity that operates in the body, that the body uses to manage itself. So both of these Eastern traditions, and all Eastern medicine traditional systems, talk about some kind of energy. And that's used as a vehicle for health, to help the body manage itself. And that's been around since day one for these traditions, whereas Western medicine is only like in the last 50 years, really, last 50, 70 years, really coming on board and starting to understand that there is more to it than just, what you can touch. There's also this electricity, which, it's just a concept. You flip a switch on and see the light come on at night, in the house. But no one really understands. There's a theory for it, but it's magic. It's still magic. It's just we have words for it. So we think, oh, yeah, no problem. So, but the Eastern medicine has been talking about the magic, not just with electricity in the house, but electricity in the body and in the heart and in the mind for a long time. So there's some wisdom there, and you see that's why the vertical distance is a bit higher for Eastern medicine. Doesn't mean it's worse or better, it just means it's got something valuable to offer, because at the moment, Western medicine doesn't really address that, just by the nature of society and, different factors. So far, so good, right? So there's something called astrology. And before you roll your eyes and, kind of say, oh my God, just astrology is actually part of Eastern medicine too. And again, each tradition, like the Tibetan tradition, the Hindu, the Indian tradition, Japanese, you name it, Chinese, everybody's got their own version of the same thing, because they're all talking about a fundamental quality of nature that actually is important to know about. And again, so this astrology, we're not talking Western astrology, like what's your sun sign and, oh my God, don't do this today, or that type of thing. The astrology we're talking about here comes from Eastern medicine. And it, again, the whole point, even now it's using different words and stuff, it's talking about the prana or the Qi. It's talking about electricity. It's talking about some pattern that nature and the human person uses to regulate things. So, what's actually amazing is that there is some, not a lot, but there is some research that shows some factors of astrology are actually predictable. They actually can show things. And depending on how much you actually open yourself to this world, this second level called energy, you will find out that this astrology thing is just like medicine. It's looking at it at what you could think of as at a slightly higher level of organization. So the metaphor of the model that's used by astrology is directly applicable to Eastern medicine and, in fact, to Western medicine too. And in fact, for instance, in India, say there's a branch of astrology called medical astrology, where they look at these energetic patterns, and they can understand. That helps them understand. And the astrologer will talk to the doctor and say, "Look, there's this pattern of stress." And the doctor can factor that into their treatment for the client. And often that actually does bring some value to the actual experience for the patient. So again, and I'm not asking you to change your belief system. I'm just telling you what the model is in terms of yoga. Why is it yoga? Because if you look, now the next step after you got the astrology is yoga itself. And yoga goes through matter, energy, and it goes even higher. So you see that over here on the left. It goes way up to phase 3, but it covers the whole thing. So the idea is that yoga, the full yoga, I'm not just talking about, doing a posture and stuff like that, which is, what most people understand here in the West these days, which has a place, but that bit about the posture and stuff is just down here at the matter. It's like you take a stance, you do a pose and stuff like that. That's all good. That's about health. But the full spread of yoga also talks about the heart, about the mind, and then this third level up here, what the mathematicians, the scientists call information, yogis and spiritual people would call it spirit, maybe the soul, like in Christianity you would talk about the soul, or consciousness. As physicists, and some physicists who are really into this stuff, they would call it consciousness. It's some higher level of information. You could just think of it, there's matter, there's energy, and then there's an even more subtle, more sophisticated, complicated, aligned type of energy, even higher, we'll call it information or spirit. It turns out that some people way back, who knows where, maybe the space people, if you're into that, if you're not into the space people coming in and all that kind of things, it's somehow people in the past, and probably just because they were out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains and had nothing else to do, they started to pay attention to what they were thinking. And if you do that, it's a process called meditation. Eventually you can sense some really subtle things. And that's the vehicle to access what's called spirit or information. So these people from the past were called yogis, and some of them became very successful at that, and they became teachers, and so there's a whole tradition of this. But the idea to get is that yoga, this entire path of yoga, is actually more medicine. It's treating the whole person. You see, each of us actually has got some matter. We got a body, we have a heart, we have a mind, but we also have this information thing, the spirit thing too. And so it's just that yoga is like the complete medicine. It's best just because of history at having a path, giving guidelines on how to actually ascend, how to actually do some practices, like I mentioned, meditation, and you probably know about doing the postures and things like that. So it tells you how to actually access and cultivate spirit or consciousness. So if you put the whole thing together, then it's like each of these 4 parts is got a specialization, is especially good at something. And it makes no sense to just stick with, I'm just going to do Western medicine and, everything else is ridiculous. makes no sense. It's just as ridiculous to actually say, oh, it's just only Eastern medicine, only Ayurveda, or only Chinese medicine, rocks. Everything else is like folly. Yeah, that doesn't quite cut it either. Same thing with astrology. That's getting deeper, and again, either that's considered off with the fairies, or else it's actually people who actually are into it. It's like it's an incredible. It can be a spiritual path, and the end of it is the yoga. Then you have people who actually learn about yoga, and if they go far enough, then it's like there's no question, because there actually is this thing called information. That this is a scientific fact. The mathematicians and scientists have been talking about it for 50, 100 years. It's just, in common experience back here in day-to-day living, we all still kind of keep our minds focused down on matter and a little bit about energy in the heart and the mind. But it's there, and it's been there for, as long as it's been around. So the idea here then is that the path to light, which is what we're talking about, so the path to spirit or God or consciousness or heaven, whatever, term you use, is basically the path up to information. And you have to start down here at the bottom and work your way up. And the idea is you should use every tool you've got your hands on to get there. So Western medicine definitely has a place. Eastern medicine has a place. The astrology, especially the Eastern astrology, is very useful. And yoga, and there are like different flavors of yoga too. There's Hindu yoga, Tibetan yoga, there's Daoism, which is like a Chinese yoga. There are lots of different metaphysical, spiritual traditions. The idea is you want to use all of them, string them together in the best way you can to get to spirit. And idea is, it's like you're connecting all of these levels so that you're still living in the world and doing what you do, but you're much more connected with nature, and that's the kind of the bottom line. Is that you can be healthier and happier, and you can bring that health and happiness into the world, and it's you become a blessing for others, and that's pretty marvelous. So this was a sketch of the path. How do you go from start up to light in terms of yoga? So the idea is yoga is actually the framework, and then some of the details are you kind of use Western medicine, Eastern medicine, astrology, and yoga itself to get there. So as I said on another video, we'll look at the same thing, but we'll use astrology, the Jyotish or Vedic astrology, as a model just to get an idea. It'll say the same thing because it comes from Eastern medicine, and it actually comes from yoga too. It's like a hybrid.